Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, and thanks for joining us again today for another episode of the In Medicine and On Medicine podcast. As always, this is Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Susan is an Oriental medicine doctor and East Asian medical practitioner here in the Las Vegas, Nevada Valley. Her information comes across the screen every so often. If you'd like to get in touch with her for make an appointment with your questions, which you may also do in the comments section below, please remember to subscribe and like what we're doing. We do it weekly. She takes a lot of time out of her busy schedule to do this for you. And today we're going to dig right into, I guess, the meat of what Susan does, which is acupuncture. And so where's a good place to begin? What's the history of the needle? How did it all begin? Where do we launch?
Well, I think the first place to start is, what is it?
What is it?
What is it? So what is acupuncture anyway? So it's a type of medical treatment that involves inserting extremely tiny, like the size of a hair, acupuncture needle into different points on the body for a therapeutic effect. Okay, so what does that mean? So acupuncture is based on Chinese physiology. It comes from China originally, and it's based on this concept of Chinese physiology, which is that differs from Western medicine physiology in that it looks at the energy in the body. So it's an energetic medicine. Okay, now what the heck does that mean?
What does that mean?
Exactly, right. What does that mean? So there's this stuff called chee.
Okay.
And we usually translate it as energy because it's kind of a tricky thing to translate.
And translated to QI in English, correct?
Yeah, QI is how you spell it. And so the Chinese character, the Chinese writing for qi is looks or has elements to it that correspond to the steam rising from a pot of rice.
Okay.
Right? It's the steam. So it's like the life force, or it's the thing that animates us. For example, and this is not technically 100% true, but for our purposes, it's true. Dead things don't have chi, and living things do.
Okay.
Okay. It's
all
you
not that simple,
all you feng shui people
right.
will be mad now, but it's for our purposes right now.
Gotcha.
So it works on the energies of the body. So what does that mean? Now, martial artists should have no problems figuring this out, because martial artists generate chi, energy, and then they use that chi in their martial arts to affect change, to stop or to block or to attack or to, whatever they do. So like, for example, Jackie Chan or any martial artist. One of my professors used to say, remember when Jackie Chan would run up the side of a building, right? Well, he would just throw his chi up the building and then he would just follow it. Okay, because the physical, what we believe is the physical, this part, the physical part of us follows the energetic part. So first, there's sort of a saying that says the chi follows the thought, okay, and the physical follows the chi.
Okay.
Right. So if we want to affect a physical change in the body, we first have to affect it energetically. So that was like the whole basis of how acupuncture happened. And so acupuncture actually predates the discovery of metal as something that people could actually use. It developed before the Bronze Age.
Were they using stone or something back then? Yeah.
Very good. So in the very beginning, and this is going back a long time. So acupuncture predates the Bronze Age, and so when metal began to be used and worked, and people figured that out, and so this goes back over 2,500 years, and which is a long time. And so in the beginning, what they did was they used something called bane stones, and bane stones were stones, and sometimes they heated them up in the fire, and then they laid them on the body in these different spots for therapeutic effect. And then the stones developed over time to get like narrower and narrower and smaller and pointier so that the practitioner could be more precise. And then metal became discovered, and so then they started actually making needles, right? So there are bane stones that archaeologists have discovered, and they look a little bit like needles, but they're bigger. So back in this period, we have documentation of people writing acupuncture prescriptions on on turtle shells, and they would inscribe the basically the diagnosis and the treatment plan on turtle shells, and we still have those turtle shells. Now, back then, most of the reasons that people were sick, or most of the reasons that practitioners, that doctors at that time figured out like what was wrong with people, usually had to do with evil spirits, right? That was kind of, if you were sick, it was probably an evil spirit. And so some of the Chinese characters for different types of sicknesses and illnesses to this day actually have little parts in them that kind of relate to like evil spirits or ghosts or something like that, or like insects or things like that.
Okay, but at a certain point, there's an epiphany.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's not an epiphany. It's just things develop over time because Chinese medicine is all about observation, right? So it's like they basically observed for 10,000 years.
Is everything like baby steps, kind of?
Oh yeah. Okay. And actually, it's a good point. So, like for example, we have this resource in Chinese medicine called the classics, okay, which are the classic medical texts that go back a long, long time. Like the earliest one is something called the Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic, which is 2 parts. Anyway, it's the first part has to do with it's like a kind of the Socratic method. It's a conversation between the Yellow Emperor and his servant Chibo, and the Yellow Emperor is saying, "So Chibo, what about this?" And Chibo is answering his questions about medicine and health and things like that. And so how do we have the classics? Well, part of this has to do with the nature of the Chinese language in itself. When I first took Chinese, when I was back in school, my Chinese professor said, "You don't know what something says in Chinese unless you already know what it says," which I know, what? Sounds crazy. But in a way, it's kind of true because the characters have so many meanings that it's all about context. So one of the things I think that Chinese people really love about English when they start learning English is how precise it is
right.
and how specific it is, right? So, but Chinese is a very, very, very old language, if not the oldest language on earth. I think the original language of the Aboriginal peoples in Australia, I think, is as old as Chinese. Okay. So it's very, very old. And languages, as they age, get simpler and simpler and simpler. And everybody can kind of have a sense of that if you pick up some old English text and you look at it and you go, "Whoa, this is really complicated. I can't even figure it out." Exactly. And then if you look at more modern English, it's much simpler. And that's,
if you look at more modern English, it's like, watch your mouth.
Right. So anyway, so there's that. So they use these bane stones, and then the metal, they began to understand how to work with metal. And so then they made these things called needles, and there's something called the original 9 needles, which they actually archaeologists have actually found them in there.
Wow.
They're, the original 9 needles that people use. They use them to insert. They used them to lance things, like lance boils, or to cut things. Okay. So they had different uses and different shapes. And then what they discovered, and this is again slowly over time, is that some points on the body seem to have this therapeutic effect on another part of the body. Like they'll have an effect right on the part of the body that the point is on. But then they'll also have this effect on another part of the body. And so this, we're talking thousands of years of observation. So, it went very slowly. But then to go back to the classics, one Chinese doctor would say, "Okay, I'm Dr. Su, and I have figured this out. This is my therapeutic approach." Okay, so then 100 years later, there's another Dr. Huh, or whatever. And that guy will say, "Well, I'm Dr. Huh. And here's what Dr. Su said 100 years ago." And then he would write out everything Dr. Su said. And then he said, but I think this. Okay. So then, a couple hundred years later, there's another doctor, Dr. E or whatever, and he would say, well, Dr. Su said this, and Dr. He said this, but this is what I think. Okay. So anyway, so this is how, so they would repeat what the previous people had discovered. So that's how we were able, or people, scholars, were able to recreate the earliest texts. They would go through these other texts and go, oh, we're going to pull out everything Dr. Su said and put together his classic of what he believed. And here is what Dr. He said, and let's put everything that Dr. He said in one classic. So that's how we ended up with the classics. It was all about how, in order to be clear, the doctors that were writing the classics had to repeat what the earlier doctors knew. So that's how they figured all of that out. So anyway,
So what about, so cut forward to the practice in modern times, and then I want to talk about what it takes to get trained now to do this.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, acupuncture became this energetic medicine. Okay. Now this all happens in the context of China and the Chinese culture having a huge herbal medicine culture. So the herbal medicine culture predates the acupuncture.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
So they already have a very sophisticated herbal medicine discipline. Okay. And then the acupuncture starts to develop over time. And what they develop, what they decide, what they kind of notice is that the chi, this energy, this thing that they can't see, but they know dead things don't have it and living things do, and they know that the physical part of us follows that energetic movement, and then they can like experience it through different techniques, for example, like martial arts and stuff like that. Like Qigong is the oldest martial art, and so that is a martial art that kind of cultivates chi or energy in the body, right? So they kind of have all these little pieces, and then they kind of pull them all together. And then basically through trial and error, they start figuring out how the body works energetically. Okay, so what they figure out is that there's that the chi moves through the body in a very complicated way, through these things called channels or meridians. And so then they have to figure out, well, how does this actually work? And it's actually like this very complicated system. But what they discovered was that the chi and what we call the blood, which is the red stuff, but as with everything in Chinese medicine, it has an energetic form, follows the chi through the channels. Okay, so they figure out where the points are, that these points along this channel have this effect. These points, when used together, have this different effect. And so, they had medical schools back then. Like, they had people who were, learning all this stuff. And they had, they had the master doctors, and then they had the students, and they had, schools. And so one way that the students had to pass their exams for acupuncture, in part anyway, was they would use what's called the bronze man. And there are still a couple of bronze mans. There are still some that exist today.
So we'll hopefully we can find a picture of it and put up the bronze man. Yeah.
So what they would do is
what was the point of it?
Well, I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
So the bronze man was how the beginning Chinese doctors would be tested to see if their point location for the acupuncture points was accurate. And so the bronze man was a sculpture of a man made out of bronze that was hollow. And so they would dip the bronze man in wax. And, well, before they dipped him in wax. So he's a bronze man, okay, made out of bronze, hollow, and has all of the acupuncture points and all of the acupuncture channels inscribed on the surface of the bronze man, and holes in the bronze where the acupuncture points are. Then they take the bronze man and dip them in wax. So then the students who are taking their exams have to accurately stick an acupuncture needle into the bronze man.
Into the hole.
And be in the hole so that when they pull the needle out, water comes out.
Oh,
and then they know, you were accurate, so you get an A. Okay.
Wow.
And so that's how they practiced. And so acupuncture developed, over years and years and years and years and years and years and years.
This isn't all happening in a vacuum world history wise. At some point there's the West and Western medicine, which is growing and gaining traction. So
Right.
what happens in China as there's Western medicine now? Do they abandon this?
No. So okay, so that's a good question. Okay, so the Jesuits, I believe it was in the 1600s, they came to, I don't know why they went to China to like kind of, I don't know, turn the Chinese into Christians. I don't know why they went, but anyway, it probably was way more political than that. But anyway, they brought Western medicine,
Okay.
which kind of everybody thought was pretty cool. Okay, because Western medicine is really good at some things. Okay, it absolutely is. So let's flash forward from the 1600s. So the more recent history of China is that, and like I'm no big expert on the history of China, so I'm just going to tell you what I know. So the history of China is a history of dynasties. Okay, so there was one dynastic ruler in China from, I think the earliest one is the Chiang dynasty, which was like 5,000 years ago.
Okay.
And there's all these periods and all these dynasties that go on and on and on and on, and they have all this history related to each one of them. But the final dynasty, the last dynasty, ended in 1911.
Oh, wow, that recent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a whole big story. There was it had to do with Queen Victoria, and basically what happened was there was a lot of pressure from the external world because China was a pretty rural, agrarian kind of country. I mean, it was big, right? Really big. It had a lot of natural resources, and it had powerful people that wanted control of it. Right?
It wasn't this modern behemoth that
God,
we know
no,
today, right?
no,
Right.
nothing like that. But they had a real agricultural heritage, which they have to this day, actually. Anyway, the Japanese, for example, were very aggressive in wanting their control of China, and then the British, because what did China have that the British really wanted really bad? Tea. I mean, basically, the British Empire was completely addicted to tea.
Yep.
And so one of the ways that they kind of figured out how to get the tea was opium. And so there are those who say that it all had to do with introducing opium to China and basically enslaving the Chinese people to drug addiction in order to exploit them and take the tea. Anyway, there were the opium wars, and it's a fascinating. I mean, if you ever want to read it,
Fascinating history. Yeah.
It's really a fascinating history. So then we look at the final emperor, who was really, really weak, and now we're in the 20th century, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and so. One of the things that's going on is, in the rest of the world, I mean, World War I is going to start, right? So there's a whole lot of aggression and conflict worldwide. China has a very weak leader, and there's a lot of internal pressures and external pressures, and I mean, it's like this whole big mess. And so in China, there's a couple of different groups that want control of China. One are the nationalists who want to align themselves with the West and be a democracy. And then one group are the communists who want China to be a communist country. So these two groups are fighting each other, and they're trying to take over different parts of China, and it's a big mess. And so what ends up happening is, and then there's external powers like the Japanese and the British and like everybody else who wants a piece of China. So it's a big, gigantic mess. So the bottom line is that the people who want a democratic republic win, okay? And that was Chiang Kai-shek, okay? And with the support of the West, okay? Well, Chiang Kai-shek really wanted China to be affiliated with the West more than anything else. But they had this big problem. They had hundreds of millions of people that were peasants living in the middle of nowhere. And okay, it's great to have like Western medicine and all this other kind of cool Western stuff in the capital city,
Beijing,
but
right.
you know, you've got the countryside that is enormous with nothing for these people. Well, while this is going on, the communists are slowly taking over piece by piece by piece, and
Yeah.
you know, they can actually, I mean, this is kind of a silly way of putting it, but like they keep the trains running on time. Like obviously they weren't really trains probably, but it was, you know, the communists were in the villages and they were
Created a sense of order.
exactly. They were creating a sense of order, which just created a bunch more of discontent with Chiang Kai-shek and with that group.
Central government.
So yeah, so it's really interesting. When I was in school, one of the textbooks that they liked, which I didn't even open like the whole time I was in school, but other acupuncture schools still use this book, and it has a little introduction where it tells you the history of the Chinese people, or history of China, and it's really funny because in the book published in China, the 50 years where China was actually a democracy, they just chopped that out. It's like it goes from this year to 50 years later, and they just take it out.
Right.
Because they don't want to admit that they were ever a republic. Okay.
Wow.
So there's a big...
And if I may say, and between 1911 and when the time Chiang Kai-shek is ousted, emerging in the West is this modernity with medicine and everything for the first time, and it's not so archaic and everything in a lot of regards.
And I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So finally the communists rise up, and they've really got the people behind them, and they kick out Chiang Kai-shek. And where does he go? Taiwan.
Oh.
Okay, so now you're like, maybe that's why China is so ticked off at Taiwan still. Okay. So he ends up going to Taiwan, and the Communist Party takes over China. And who is the head of the Chinese Party, or the Communist Party? Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong has a lot of stuff he has to do. Okay, so first, you know, he has to consolidate power, which was pretty brutal. But then medicine-wise, okay, he thinks Chinese medicine, you know, which is basically a folk medicine. Mao Zedong thought Chinese medicine was a bunch of crap. Okay, he wanted Western medicine. He saw the value of it, and that's what he wanted. But he was a really practical guy, I think, in a lot of ways, and he realized there's no way. I can't give this to a billion people. It's impossible. Yeah. So what he did was he said, okay, well, let's figure out how we can deliver healthcare to millions and millions and millions and millions of people who have never had healthcare ever.
Back to the acupuncture we used to.
Does, exactly. Yeah. So he trains a whole army of the barefoot doctors, and the barefoot doctors were kind of trained like an EMT. Okay. They could do some minimal Western medicine, and they could do some minimal Chinese medicine. They could do some acupuncture. They could do some herbs. They could do some first aid. They could, deliver a baby. They could do stuff. And he sent them out into the countryside, and it was a huge, really, literally the far reaches, and very well received. And just as an aside, he also did the same thing to the language, because before Mao, the characters that people used to write Chinese were really complicated. And don't quote me on this, but it's like the literacy rate in China was like, I don't know, 10% or so. I mean, they had basically the entire nation was illiterate.
Except for the wealthy, probably. Right.
So what he did was he called in these scholars, and he's like, we got to fix this. And so what they did was they created a simpler and easier form of written Chinese called pinyin, which we still use it today. Much simpler. Excuse me. And over the course of years implementing that, the literacy rate in China skyrocketed and went to 90% from practically nothing. I mean, it was really kind of a brilliant thing to do. But anyway.
Well, because that changes the literacy rate leads
changes
to
everything.
Education rate leads to everything.
Leads to everything, right. Okay, so basically the Chinese, as a culture, really embraced Western medicine and really, really liked it. But they also hung on to their traditional Chinese medicine. They tried to kind of get rid of it, but they kind of couldn't because everybody already knew it. And they already knew that it worked. I mean, basically, if you break your leg, don't get acupuncture. Like, go to the flipping doctor and get your leg. So I mean, they knew. They knew as a people. Everybody knew, that if you feel like you're catching a cold, this herbal formula is really going to help, right? What does Western medicine have to offer you when you feel like you're getting a cold? That would be nothing, right? So they were able to pick and choose and use Chinese medicine and use Western medicine together, and they still do to this day. Chinese medicine is actually one of their biggest and most popular exports
Really?
to the rest of the world. Yeah, there's Chinese medicine practiced all over the world now. So anyway, so that's kind of interesting. So that's where it came from.
Okay.
Okay, what were you asking me now?
Tell us now about how Chinese medicine came to the West, how you discovered it, how it even got on your radar, and then you have a fabulous story about Nixon going to China and and his wasn't a press secretary. He was worked for the New York Times or something. James
Yes,
Reston,
he was on the press plane.
Right,
I
but
don't
hold that
remember.
thought. We'll get to that. But tell me how.
Okay, so in 1972, now, okay, there's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's basically only 2 or 3 channels on TV. So everybody is sitting down and watching the same thing on TV at the same time. That's how it worked. So in 1972, I was 14, I think, and President Nixon went to China. Now, ever since 1949, when the communists took over China, it was a completely closed country.
Yep.
Nobody knew anything about it. Nothing. It was like a big empty spot on the globe. Nobody in, nobody out. Nothing. Okay. And Nixon went to China, and it was a big buildup because first the Chinese sent the United States a present. They sent us 2 panda bears.
Right.
And everybody was like, ooh, pandas? We've never seen pandas before.
What did we send? Hot dogs and apple pie?
No, we sent musk oxen.
Okay.
Which was kind of ridiculous because at the time people were like, why don't we send them buffalo? And everyone's like, why did we send them musk oxen? Whatever, we sent them musk oxen. Okay. Then we had like a cultural exchange, like music, musicians. Then we had ping pong, which the Chinese killed us at because, nobody here really played ping pong.
And these little trust building
But these little things happened, right? And then Nixon went to China, and everyone was glued to the TV.
All day, every day.
Millions of people were glued to the TV every day because you were seeing things we'd never seen before. Like Nixon and his wife, Pat, at some state dinner using chopsticks.
Yep.
Chopsticks.
At the Great Wall.
At the Great Wall of China.
Which we've not really seen.
Tiananmen Square. I mean, it was completely blew people's minds. And plus, everybody's wearing a mouse suit. They're all dressed the same. There's no cars. It's all bicycles. It's like super low tech. It's like crazy. So, and there's Mao Zedong everywhere. And so, it was wild. So, then what happened later, there was something on the news, and it was this weird story because apparently there was this man named James Reston, and he was traveling with Nixon.
He was an editor or executive for the New York Times or something with the New York Times.
He was on the press plane or something, but he was with them. Well, apparently he got sick in Beijing, and he needed an emergency appendectomy. And they whisked him off to the University of Beijing hospital, and they took out his appendix. And he was wide awake, and they used ear acupuncture as anesthesia. So they just did needles in his ear. He was wide awake, and they cut open his abdomen and took out his appendix. And he was pretty freaked out by the whole thing. But so was everybody else. It was like, they did what? Like, what's that?
And naturally, he recounts it in the New York Times.
Yes. And everybody was just like, what the heck is that? So I remember seeing these videos, or not videos, they were films at the time. Films. What is this acupuncture? And how are they doing this? Of like a woman getting abdominal surgery in China, and they're feeding her pieces of pineapple while she's having abdominal surgery because she's wide awake. It's like, what is this? So, I mean, it was completely crazy. but finding information about China and about Chinese medicine, there wasn't anything until, gosh, I don't remember the year exactly, but it was in the late 70s when I had gotten to college where I found The Web That Has No Weaver, which was the first book published in English about Chinese medicine by a guy named Ted Kapchuk. And for years, it was it. It was the only book on Chinese medicine. And I read it and I thought, oh, this is really fascinating. I'd like to learn more about it. But there was nothing. There was that book.
So they weren't exporting it to the West yet, the
No.
whole concept and practice.
What I did not know, but what I learned later, was that James Reston came back to the United States and said, we got to get some Chinese medicine going here, right? So, and I don't know the whole story about this, but he and some friends got together and they got some Chinese doctors to come to the United States, and they started a school in Southern California. And that was the first school of Chinese medicine. And then a few months or a few years later, some people came up to the Pacific Northwest and they opened up the Northwest Institute of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, which was the school that I ended up going to back, years later in 1998. So that's how it came here. So it was, the schools were like a medical school. They were modeled on how the Chinese medicine schools were in China, right? So, it was very difficult, and there was a lot that you had to do. And then when you reached a certain level of expertise, you had to be an intern, just like in any medical school. And back then, you couldn't be an intern in the United States. There was no place to go.
And they have to take all those teachings upon teachings upon teachings for thousands of years and translate it so you can teach it.
Well, exactly. So even when I was in school in 98, I had teachers who translated stuff for us because it wasn't in translation. I mean, now there's so much more in translation. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's great. One thing that, you can go to PubMed, right? PubMed is basically a library online, and it's got like every journal article and every study in medicine ever made, ever done worldwide. It's right there. I mean, it's like amazing. And there's so much stuff in translation from the Chinese that, it's like so great. It's so much easier than it was in the old days. So anyway, so then we started to have some schools here, and little by little, we started to have people, learning Chinese, and learning Chinese medicine. So even when I started in school, which was 98, I still had to take a year of Chinese. Right? I mean, nowadays, I seriously doubt that they require you to take any Chinese, maybe just a tiny little bit. But even then, you had to at least, be able to read a sentence. No, I don't remember.
I don't think I ever even heard of acupuncture until, I moved to LA in 1985, and there was that alternative magazine, New Era, New Frontiers, or something, and that's where all the masseuses and
right, and like the hippies
and the
herbalists,
Ayurvedic murder, right, and that's where they all advertised.
Right. So that's when things started to happen. So anyway, like one of my professors, who was an herbal professor, when I was in school, she was of that era that she had to go to China to do her internship. And she was a big, tall woman and gay. And like the Chinese, I mean, she told some stories. The Chinese just could not figure her out because she was very large. I mean, she's not very large at all, but to them, she must have looked like a giant. And they were just like, what kind of human being is this? We've never seen anything like her. And they were just baffled by her. But yeah, she had to go and do that. I've had other professors over the years who had to go to China to be interns. That was the only way you could do it. It wasn't until a few years later that we started to have clinics that were large enough that people could do their internships in this country. So like when I had to do my internship, my school was huge. We had 30 clinics. I mean, I could do a shift at a big trauma hospital. I could do a shift at a prison. I could do a shift at a assisted living facility. I could do a shift with street kids. I could do a shift with an addiction facility. Yeah. I mean, there was just a wealth of places for me to go and be an intern and learn. Right?
Okay, but so now tell us what is the educational process? How long How many years? What are
Okay,
the paces you get put through?
When I went into school, you could get into Chinese medicine school without an undergraduate degree,
Okay.
but you pretty much had to have almost everything that you needed to get an undergraduate degree. So most people did. I mean, if you had like pre-med stuff, you needed like biology and chemistry, blah, 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 all that stuff. And so most people had an undergraduate degree. And some schools now require an undergraduate degree, and honestly, you might as well, because all the stuff that you need to get in, it kind of adds up to a degree. So then it takes between 4 and 5 years.
Okay.
I did it in 4 years, but I was under a lot of pressure to get it done. And so I took, 20 credits or more every semester or every quarter to get it done as fast as possible, and it was pretty brutal. I mean, if I had it to do over again,
The normal pace is 5 years.
Normal pace was 5 years. That's for Chinese medicine, but in many places you can also just get a degree in acupuncture. And acupuncture was much simpler because it was the energetics, and you didn't have to do the herbal medicine part. And I'll tell you the difference. But anyway, so people could get a degree in acupuncture in 3 years. So then you graduate, right? You got your 3 years or you got your 5 years. So you're either an acupuncturist or you're a practitioner of Chinese medicine, which basically is acupuncture and herbal medicine mixed together. And then you have to pass the national board exam. And the national board exam is put out by this group. They just changed their name. So I can't even tell you what their name is. I mean, it used to be the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. Now I think it's the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine, I think, because I think they took the word Oriental out because that's, kind of an old-fashioned word that some people could find offensive. So let's get rid of that. So anyway, so they put on the board exams. And so when I took my board exams, they were only offered twice a year, and you had to travel in like one location, right? So luckily, when I had to take mine, they were being offered in Seattle. So I just had to go down to Seattle and stay in a hotel overnight because it took a couple of days. And people came from all over the place. There were some guys in the room with me who were from Ireland.
Wow.
I know, which was kind of crazy. But anyway, it was just a brutal series of exams that just made you want to cry all day. And then, of course, back then it was all analog, right? So you had to wait 6 weeks to get the results. So I mean, it was pretty tough. And, then you had to go to your state, and then you had to get your state license, and then, you had to provide them with all kinds of data, all your transcripts and, all this other stuff. And it was tough. So that's how it was. Today, the educational requirements are similar. Now we're getting into my opinion. Okay, so my opinion, this is just my opinion. My opinion is that over the years, and I've been teaching Chinese medicine for 15 years, so I feel like it is my opinion, but I feel like I have something to base it on. Over the years, what I've seen in schools is that they have slowly but surely reduced the amount of Chinese medicine that they're teaching. Yeah, they've diluted it, and they've increased the amount of Western medicine. Part of it might be for liability purposes. I don't know. Part of it might be because they feel kind of insecure about themselves and they want to be more accepted as doctors, Right,
but like I said, it's the dilution of something unique.
Yeah, I think. I mean, when I would teach and I would see like what the students were getting taught and compare it to what I learned when I was in school, I mean, it was kind of depressing.
All right, so let's change topics and spend our last segment talking about what this unique medicine treats. What's the best thing for patients to come and see you for?
Oh, okay. So what I like to tell people is we can basically treat just about everything.
Okay.
The only thing we don't treat is we don't treat cancer.
Broken bones.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to treat you while you're. I mean, the bottom line is, what does Western medicine do really well? It does the big guns,
heavy lifting,
the heavy lifting, and emergency medicine. I mean, like I said in the beginning,
pharmaceuticals too, when they're in the right time and place.
Absolutely, pharmaceuticals are a godsend. I mean, my God, look at antibiotics.
Right.
They're amazing. Now, Now we have antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Why? Because people totally misused antibiotics, and now we've got problems, okay? But antibiotics as a class of drugs, when they were first invented, I mean, it's miraculous, right? So Western medicine has the big guns. So if you need the big guns, don't come see me, right? Go to the ER.
But literally for everything else?
Well, pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, Western medicine is good for disease
Okay.
or trauma. But as far as health goes, I mean, I'm sorry, but they're not very good at that. You know, if you're basically a healthy person, but you've got, you know, insomnia or hot flashes or obesity or
Allergies.
addiction or allergy, they're just not that good at it. You know, I mean, they can throw medication at you and, you know, okay, that can kind of work, but they don't really, it's just not how they think to look at, well, what is the underlying constitutional issue here? Why is every spring this person completely, their life is like ruined because they have these terrible allergies, these seasonal allergies. Like, well, why don't we figure out like why? Why does this person have it and this person doesn't? So, you know, so there's just some things Western medicine's very, very good at, and some things like when people have problems with their health, they're just not that good at that. So Chinese medicine is super good at that.
So it almost sounds like, tell me if I have this right. Because Chinese medicine is an energetic medicine that moves things along, that's where you get into that root and branch thing, right? And Western medicine is almost like a Band-Aid on the branch,
Yes.
but Chinese medicine seeks to get to the root.
Right. So we talked about this before. Then in Chinese medicine, there's the branch and the root, right? So the branch is the symptom. This is why people come into the office, and this is what you have to get rid of, okay? But the root is why the branch developed. That's an underlying...
So that goes back to that several thousand thing year ago you were saying earlier where they discovered, oh, I'm touching here, but it's affecting down here.
Right.
Okay.
So if you just address the branch, okay, you might get rid of the branch. But if you don't address the root, what's to prevent the branch from just growing back, right?
And bigger.
And bigger, yeah. So or different, you know. So that's like a really big deal in Chinese medicine. And so like what is it treat? Well, let's see. What's a good... Okay, well, one of the best things that acupuncture is good for is pain, right? Because what is pain? In Chinese medicine, pain is something we call chee and blood stagnation. I mean, that's basically it. It means the chee and the red stuff, the blood that follows the chee, through the complicated course of the channels in the body, is stuck. It's not flowing the way it's supposed to. It's stuck. And when the chi is stuck, it aches. And when the blood is stuck, it can be sharp and stabbing. But the bottom line is something's not moving the way it's supposed to. When the chi is flowing through the body like it's supposed to, you feel good. So one thing acupuncture is terrific at is pain. And I mean, it can be like miraculous. I mean, I had this patient a while ago. Oh my God, the poor guy. He walked, I mean, he wasn't that old. I mean, he was, I don't know, a little bit younger than me. So 50s maybe. Anyway, he came walking in like this little old man. He showed me his x-ray, which was not good. Okay. He had a lot of problems in his back and in his hips, terrible pain, could barely move. And he came in because he was just desperate. I mean, he couldn't, he was grasping at straws. And so I got him on the table. And, you know, I mean, his Chinese diagnosis, I mean, he was basically a pretty healthy guy. He just had this terrible pain. And, you know, the underlying structure wasn't so great, you know. And so I gave him a treatment. And he got up and he said, I don't have any pain.
I don't what?
I don't have any pain. And I said, yeah. I said, you know, that happens.
It works.
It happens.
It's
you know,
supposed to.
And I told him, well, look, okay, you know, it's not magic. Okay, you've had this pain for God knows how long. So, and I told him what I tell everybody. I'm looking at intensity of symptom, duration of relief. So, okay, if your pain went from whatever it was, an 8 out of 10 to a 0, that's terrific. If it comes back,
how long does it last?
How long does it last? Okay, so if you get 2 or 3 days of relief, then we want you to get 6 or 8 days of relief. And if you get 8 days of relief, then we want you to get 2 weeks of
And
relief.
it's 8 out of 10. You want to
Right.
bump them to 9 out of 10.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So intensity of symptom, duration of relief. So he told me this later. He walked out of the office
Uh-oh.
and he walked to his car and he was so overcome with emotion that he didn't have any pain, that he couldn't bear it. And he sat down on the curb next to his car and he felt something in his back go twin.
Oh, he tweaked something.
And the pain came
from
back.
The emotion.
And the pain came back.
That's painful.
Oh my God, that was painful. And I was just like, oh, you're kidding, but he had, so we treated him again and, told him don't do that again. And I mean, it wasn't that many treatments that he was doing great. I mean, it was the chi and blood stagnation. We had to get it moving. Now, did he probably need back surgery? I don't know. I don't know what happened to him, but I know that when he stopped doing acupuncture, he basically didn't have anything that was worth treating. I mean, his symptoms were practically gone, or maybe like very, very mild. Maybe he ended up getting back surgery. It could have been because he did have something legitimate going on.
Okay, so that begs the question. Okay, so that begs the question of what's the time frame? What's the duration of all this? Is it a quick fix? Is it sometimes a quick fix? Is it going to take forever to cure?
Yeah, no, it doesn't take forever. So what I usually tell people is the faster it's coming on, the faster we get rid of it.
Okay.
So if you wake up in the morning and you feel like you're coming down with something, definitely go get acupuncture. It's coming on fast, boom. We can kick it out, get rid of it as fast as possible. I just had a patient.
What do you do? Just keep the energy moving along so it doesn't
something's
have a chance
coming
to come
in.
Right.
Okay, and so we have to expel it.
Right.
Okay, if it's coming in and it gets in and it makes you sick, well, then getting rid of it's a little bit trickier.
Right, but if you catch it early,
That's
okay.
really good. I just had a patient and I really failed with her, and I felt really, really bad about this, and I still feel bad about this, and I don't really want to give up about it, but she lost her sense of taste and smell.
Oof.
And it was after COVID.
Okay.
Now, was it due to COVID? And I told her this. We don't know. Just because you had COVID and you lost your sense of taste and smell, it seems like that's a causal relationship. The COVID caused this, but we don't know for sure. It could be a third thing. We don't know. And she looked at me and said, no, it was the COVID. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I'm just telling you, just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean they're related. Anyway, that was 5 years ago. So by the time she came to me, she hadn't had any sense of taste or smell in 5 years. And I tried everything I could think of. Everything. And, I wasn't successful. I mean, she had like some little twinges and some little things would happen, but, and I just thought,
But what about somebody else with a longer term injury, or somebody who had, I've had this problem for 2 years and I haven't come and seen you. You're not getting rid of that the same day.
Highly unlikely.
Okay.
Highly unlikely. I mean, there's a rule of thumb that is like it's going to take 10% of the time that you've had it. So if you've had something for 2 years,
You should expect
it's probably going to take 4 months.
4 or 5 months, right?
Right. Yeah, something like, I mean, that's kind of a ballpark. But what I also tell patients is you're going to know. Like, it's not like a secret. You're going to know if this is helping you. Is it helping you or not? Right? If it's not helping you, you're going to know it. Right?
And like you said, it's usually not a whatever the problem is to zero fix. It's you feel it in stages
Yeah.
as the treatments go along.
Yeah, and what's kind of cool is that people get kind of tapped into their own body and what their own body feels like. When in a lot of times people are not that way. They're kind of surprised, like they really only pay attention to their body when it hurts. But before your body hurts, there's all kinds of other sensations going on before it hurts, right? And so when you get sensitive to that, when you start feeling like, oh, my back, I don't have my back pain right now, but I can feel that the last few days it's kind of tightening up, and I never noticed that before. So that type of awareness is really, really great. And then people get more sensitive to their own bodies and their own symptoms, and then they can go like, maybe I should do a little intervention here before the pain starts, and they just develop a way of being that is much healthier and also helps them manage their symptoms so much better than just going, it hurts, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, by the time it hurts, like God knows how long this has been developing before you finally feel it. Right.
Right.
Yeah, so that's really good.
Okay, and then so with all that, we're talking about when something's wrong with you. But what about for general health care, proactively, prophylactically,
Right.
using acupuncture, as just part of your general routine before something happens or before you get ill?
Right. So the rule of thumb is if everything's great and you feel great and you're really healthy, you should get acupuncture 4 times a year when the seasons change.
Okay.
Because we're big on weather, right? We're big on what is going on externally and what's going on internally really affect each other. So that's what I tell people. If everything's great, come back in spring. For example, I had a patient who came in for fertility, and fertility is something that people like specialize in. And I certainly do not specialize in fertility, but like we're really good at it. So, I've even had like amazing success with it, and I'm certainly no expert on fertility. But yeah, she came in, I don't know, 3 times, I think. And it was interesting because I took her pulse and I thought, I think she's pregnant. And I wrote in her chart, this patient's pulse seems to suggest that she's pregnant, but it's too early in the treatment for me to share this information. I put that in her chart.
Yeah.
And then the next week she came in and she said, guess what? I'm pregnant. And I went, well, let me show you what I wrote last week, And
Oh, that's
her
wild.
pregnancy is just going great. She's super healthy. Everything's fine. And so I said, you know what? Come see me at the beginning of the next trimester.
Okay,
So once a
just
trimester.
regularly, so regularly, like I said, proactively, prophylactically, or what if you have a recurring problem, like little Marty here, just went to the doctor last week because he had diarrhea, and we're Marty a human. The doctor said to us, didn't you bring Marty in last January also for this
Right.
problem? So that might suggest come and see you in January or in December,
Right,
since you
right.
might have an annual issue.
Right, which I had this patient who had terrible allergies, and what we figured out was that his allergies happen in March. That's what happened. So we got rid of his allergies, and then sure enough, he came to me every year, like middle of February, and I'd see him like 2 or 3 times, and then that would be the end of it. He'd get through his allergy season, he was fine, and then he'd come back to next
Wow,
February.
that's
Yeah, which is
remarkable.
great.
Yeah.
Wow,
cool.
Yeah.
So that, friends, ladies, gentlemen, students, that is a masterclass for you in a little bit of about an hour on acupuncture, the history of acupuncture, why it's so great, and everything you need to know to now try and go and embark on your acupuncture healthcare life. So, as always, I want to thank Susan. Susan Wellman is a Oriental medicine doctor and East Asian medical practitioner here in the Las Vegas, Nevada Valley. Her information, as you saw, comes across the screen every so often. You may feel free to get in touch with her to make an appointment, ask questions, leave comments, which you may also do in the comments section below. And please like and subscribe our podcast. She gives up a lot of her time to do this for us every week and educate us on an alternative method of looking at healthcare. The stars of the show are, as always, Leo, the black flat hair, and Marty, the gray wired hair. You saw Sunny, the gray tabby cat, come around for the ride for a little bit today. I'm Scott. This is the In Medicine and On Medicine podcast. We will definitely do this again next time. Until then, have a great day.